It's time without quality and media without credibility and childhood that is forgotten in the era of war. Ladies and gentlemen, peace be upon you. Good afternoon. Today, we are in a webinar on media disinformation and child rights violations in Yemen between evading responsibility and the victim's right to the truth. So, this study is part of the project to enhance awareness and to protect the rights of children in conflicts in Yemen, Safe, Part 2, organized by Rust Coalition, the Yemeni Coalition to Monitor Human Rights Violations, and DT Institute. And this seminar will launch the study on media disinformation and child human rights violations in Yemen, evading responsibility and the right of victims to the truth. So first of all, I'd like to welcome all of you, the panelists in this workshop, and the participants. I'd like to welcome Mr. Mutahar al-Budigi from Rust Coalition and Mr. Faraz Hamdouni from DT Institute. And we also have in this seminar speakers, panelists, Ms. Safan Nasser, Mr. Farouk al-Kamali, and Mr. Khalil al-Kamil. Before we start presenting the study, so we'll have some opening remarks from Rust Coalition to be delivered by Mutahar al-Budigi. Please, you have the floor. Thank you very much. I'd like to express my thanks to you, Abdulillah, dear colleagues and esteemed attendees, all protocols observed. Good afternoon and Ramadan Kareem to you. It is my pleasure and honor on behalf of my colleagues in the Yemeni Coalition to Monitor Human Rights Violations, the Rust Coalition, to welcome you all to the opening of this seminar, launching the study Media Disinformation and Child Rights Violations in Yemen. This study is one of the important knowledge and rights outputs of the project on strengthening awareness and ensuring children's rights during the conflict in Yemen, Phase 2, implemented by Rust in partnership with our partners, the DT Institute. Throughout the project, we have worked to monitor and document the 6 grave violations against children, highlighting their interrelationships. Our team of open source researchers also documented media disinformation tactics to support advocacy, awareness raising, and education efforts, and providing psychosocial support to child victims and survivors, and continuing to exert pressure on both local and international levels for accountability and justice. We meet today at a critical juncture. Children in Yemen have not only been victims of war, but also of a parallel and equally dangerous war, the war of information and narratives. In this war, media disinformation is used to distort facts, justify violations, and silence victims, and sometimes to demonize those who seek uncover the truth or demand for justice. The significance of this study stems from its being the first of its kind in Yemen to directly and systematically link media disinformation to violations against children and the resulting impact on documentation, accountability, protection, and victims' rights to the truth. The study does not merely describe reality, it seeks to dismantle the mechanisms of disinformation and how they are employed within the context of conflict, highlighting their impact on public awareness, decision making, and the opportunities for protection and redress for children and their families. Combating disinformation is not just a media issue, it's a fundamental human rights issue. The right to access to information, the right of victims to the truth, and the right of society to know what has happened are all essential rights that intersect with protecting children and preventing recurrence of violations. The wider the scope of the truth, the narrower the space of impunity. And here I'd like to express my thanks and appreciation to Safanasa for preparing this study, Farouk Al Kamali and Khalil Kamil for presenting their papers. I'd like to thank you all for your attendance and participation, and to the representatives of society organizations who stand on the front lines defending the victims, and to the journalists and activists who face the challenges of the situation and strive to uphold the truth, and to the representatives of government agencies whose presence we value as a necessary step towards integrated roles and effective partnership in protecting the children of Yemen, and to the international organizations' representatives for their continued interest and support for child protection issues in Yemen. I also extend special thanks to our partners at the DT Institute for their support and active partnership with us, and for the trust that we built over the past years, which has resulted in uh, quality initiatives and activities that raise awareness, protect rights, and support accountability mechanisms. In conclusion, we hope that this study will contribute to opening a professional and responsible discussion, and to serve as a practical tool for all stakeholders, media, society, official bodies, and international partners to enhance child protection and to safeguard the society from misleading narratives, and to support documentation and advocacy efforts to achieve the undeniable truth and secure rights that cannot be postponed. Thank you. We are looking forward to the presentations, and I'd like to thank Abdullah for facilitating this discussion. Thank you very much, my dear Mutahar from Rust Coalition, for highlighting the study, the activities of Rust Coalition, and what you have done so far to serve the issues of childhood in Yemen under these tough circumstances the country is going through, the political, the economic, and the rights issues the country is facing, which all cast shadow on children and their suffering in Yemen. Thank you, Mutahar. And now I move to an overview or opening remarks from DT Institute to be delivered by Mr. Firas Hamdoun. You have the floor. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Ramadan Kareem to all of you. I'm Firas Hamdouni, the Yemen Program Manager in DT Institute. So I'd like to express my thanks and appreciation to our partners across the coalition represented by Mutahar for organizing the session and for the efforts they have conducted under the SAFE project that continued for about 4 years. I'm honored to see you all as part of this session. My dear friends from inside and outside Yemen, thank you. Very quickly, I'll talk about 2 points. The first is an explanation about the program. And number two, I wanted to share a small experience regarding the issues of this report that is close to the context of Yemen, but it's from my country, from Syria. So I wanted to share that with you. As for SAFE program, well, it has been in operation for about 3 years to improve the local and international recognition and protection of child rights and to facilitate accountability for the perpetrators. So it's not only the coalition that is part of this. We in phase one, we had Rasad and we had phase two Insaf Center under SAFE program. And through a number of stages, we have focused on monitoring and documentation as well as local and international advocacy, in addition to the interaction with the representatives of the Yemeni government through training or through a discussion fora in order to improve accountability regarding child rights violations during the conflict in Yemen. What I want to very quickly note is that in the future, the program is will be finalized next month. It will be completed, but we hope that there can be an extension for this program and try to work with the existing and new partners. And we will keep you informed about that. As for regarding the topic of the study on child rights violations through SAFE program, and I'd like to thank Safa for working on that. Through SAFE, and before that, we find that there is disinformation whenever there are violations, the grave or non-grave violations regarding human rights or child rights. They continue, they do not stop because there is narrative to erase this violation. If it is a school destroyed, child killed, or a girl sexually abused, the violation does not end there because there is media disinformation that continues after that. So, media, بس شر. So, what we were saying is that the violation does not stop there, it continues because of the disinformation. So, I had a practical experience in Syria and Ghouta Dimashq. I have seen during the Daraa massacre that happened in August 2012, about 1,800 people died, and the regime forces killed dozens of children and their families. After the massacre, there was a media disinformation coordinated one using the regime TV and the channels controlled by the regime. So even after the UN missions were evacuated, they came and they interviewed some victims, and I was an eyewitness of how the families of the victims were terrified in order to say a false statement or to mention false statements to say that unknown militias have committed this massacre. Although we were there, we were survivors. We have seen what happened. So the families knew the truth, but because of the fear, they had to falsely testify. So we see here how the manipulation happens to prevent accountability, and this inflicted irreparable damage to the families of the victims by denying their suffering and negating the efforts of documentation the civil society wanted to do, and the impunity as well. And the second point is disinformation is a tool for impunity in Yemen. We see that there is child recruitment by the Houthis in thousands and thousands, and there is denial of that. And they say that these are volunteers and they voluntarily participate, or they claim that these children are above the legal age. So, what I want to note uh, regarding the shelling of schools and hospitals, there could be mutual accusations from both parties of the conflict, and there is disinformation, and therefore accountability is lost, and it becomes extremely difficult to claim for the rights of these people. So at the end, protecting the rights of children is not a human issue, it's the cornerstone for stability the future, not only in Yemen, but everywhere. We in Syria, after the end of the conflict, we see that we have generations that are destroyed, so they require decades in reconstruction and rehabilitation, and I hope that Yemen does not go through that, although the situation in Yemen is quite similar to Syria. We in the DT Institute and our partners, including Rust Coalition, we are always open to cooperate with all stakeholders, the national and the international agencies, the representatives of the government. And thank you. Thank you, Mr. Firas, for for these remarks and for comparing the Yemeni case to the Syrian one. There are similarities, and it's great that you are well aware. You are well aware of the media narrative and disinformation regarding child rights violations. Yes, media built a false narrative about many violations against children, especially in conflict areas. And as you have indicated, Firas, what happened in Syria, what is happening in Yemen, what the conflict parties are doing to the children, and in particular, child recruitment, and what the Houthi group is doing, child recruitment and taking them from schools, trying to indoctrinate them and providing them with inducements to be recruited, although the militia is trying to say that these are volunteers in the army, where there can be no volunteering in in the army for underage, even if they volunteer. So this media narrative is a mere disinformation. And thank you, Mr. Faras, for that. Please, the panelists and the guests, please keep your microphones off. Keep your microphones off so the panelists can speak. And at the end of the session, we'll take the questions and comments. And now we have Ms. Safa Nasser to present the study on media disinformation and child rights violations in Yemen, evading responsibility and the right of the victims to the truth. So we have Safa. Please allow her to present the study. And please avoid interruption. Ms. Safa, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Abdullah. I would like to thank you, and I thank everyone, my colleagues, the Rust Coalition. I'd like to thank you for your efforts and the rest of the team. What they did, the distribution of the questionnaires, the collection of data and information. And I'd like to thank our colleagues in the DT Institute. Can you allow me to share my screen? So far you have 20 minutes. Yeah, sure. We can add one more minute. So the study that I will present today, as indicated by my colleagues, it's the media disinformation and child rights violations in Yemen, between evading responsibility and the right of victims to the truth. The study concludes that children are not only subject to the material violations, but there are other violations that affect them, including the media use of their causes and their issues. And here lies the importance of the study to understand how media disinformation contributed to these violations. So we have to understand the overall context of the conflict in Yemen, which escalated in 2014 and it became multi-party conflict after 2015. And the United Nations have documented thousands of grave violations against children, including killing, maiming, forced conscription, sexual violence, kidnapping, targeting schools, hospitals, and preventing aid, which led to a worsening situation of children. And this led to fragility, the situation of children. And sometimes there are no direct impacts on the children, but they increase the fragility of children in the context of the conflict. And here comes media, because media is uh, is a party to these violations. So violation in this context has become not a neutral medium, but media became an actor in the conflict through news and the coverage it provides, and through guiding the public opinion. And this led to denial of responsibility, and all this is serving political purposes, and all this led to undermining documentation efforts and is strengthening impunity, the culture of impunity. As we said, media disinformation at the beginning. Maybe at the beginning we could have said that this is a professional issue, but it's no more that. So it is affecting the victims and their families. It undermines documentation efforts, and it leads to the denial of the suffering of the victims. So if there are violations perpetrated, and if you deny them, you are denying the right of the victims to their rights and to the truth. And all this will weaken the transitional justice process, because transitional justice is about knowing the truth and knowing who committed these violations. So when this is lost, well, what transitional justice we are talking about? And here comes the study problem. The study problem is about uh, how media disinformation is employed to erase the child rights violations and to conceal them. And the assumptions of the study are that this leads to poor confidence in the media and justice institutions, and this disinformation leads to denial of responsibility, and it affects victims. And the question of the study is how the media disinformation is used to conceal these violations, and what is the impact of that on justice, accountability, and victim protection. The importance of the study is as follows. There is an attempt to link between combating disinformation and the protection of child rights. So these things are intertwined, and it's not about an issue with the media or press or the practices. It's no more that it is connected to the child rights and protecting child rights. For this reason, the importance of this study is linking combating disinformation to child rights protection, and from that comes the strengthening of the principles of transitional justice, and to identifying the psychosocial impact of this disinformation on on the victims, and to support the monitoring and documentation and accountability efforts. So if we find that this disinformation leads to preventing documentation, so we have to combat it in order to improve documentation and monitoring and accountability. And it's about linking between media and transitional justice process. So the objectives of the study include analyzing the methods of disinformation and what are the patterns used for disinformation regarding child rights violations and to analyze the misleading content production and as well as the impact of it on the public awareness. The objective can be achieved through a number of questions that we ask, analytical questions and field questions. The analytical ones are about the analysis of the content, to analyze the content of 18 documented cases and media disinformation cases. And it is a descriptive approach as well as that combines between the qualitative and the quantitative analysis. It's the analysis of media materials and the field study, a questionnaire, and relying on Russell database. The 18 cases that we have documented included items or cases, pieces that are published through social media or official statements, videos, reports, video reports, and all this. We have 17 items or materials that we have analyzed, and these were published on social media. 17 published using Ansarullah outlets, 3 pro-government channels, and the rest are social media action, Facebook. As I said, there are questions that we have to ask and try to find answers for these questions, knowing what is the pattern that is used in disinformation and the way these materials are produced, the discourse that is used, which parties are creating this disinformation, and how the child victims are depicted and portrayed. So there are field questions that the journalists answered, and it was about how the journalists evaluate this disinformation, what are the factors, motives behind disinformation, the impact of it on the human rights work and on the victims. The field sample that participated, we had 62 participants, journalists, men and women, researchers, human rights activists, and when we selected the sample, we have taken into consideration the geographic diversity inside Yemen, people inside Yemen and people outside Yemen. So the selection criteria, the professional experience in media and human rights documentation. We had 62 participants, as I indicated. Key results of the study. So the media disinformation is related to different institutional, social, and legal factors. So one of the reasons for media disinformation is the poor independence of the media and the poor awareness. And the media outlets, we found that they are connected financially or administratively to the conflict parties, and this is problematic. And the poor media awareness amongst the audience, the recipients, because the recipients cannot discriminate whether this information they receive is true or false. People would disseminate this information and they propagate disinformation. And one of the reasons that led to the spread of this media disinformation is the lack of laws and legislations and the lack of media independence. According to the analytical study, we have seen that media outlets are blaming the other parties and trying to accuse the other party of being responsible for this and that. And so the victims were smeared and tainted, and the victims are presented as security threats of being spies being affiliated with the terrorist cells, or the victims are sometimes used uh, for propaganda. So a child killed is treated as a martyr, and so uh, children are protected, are portrayed, sorry, and presented as martyrs. And there is also there are some of the violations are presented as legitimate measures to preserve security and to justify these violations and to say that these are necessary interventions and actions. And there is also the concealment of information and complete media blackout. And this is a very serious practice because the violation is not discussed in the public space. And sometimes there could be conflicting stories and accounts, and this is deliberate because they're trying to conceal what happened and distorting facts and creating alternative narratives and stories, and therefore the recipients will not know where is the truth, where are the lies. So this leads to not understanding the violation and who's behind it. So the recipients will not know who's behind this violation. Participants indicated that all conflict parties, they have used different media outlets. Safa, you still have 1 minute to finalize because time is upon us. All conflict parties are practicing disinformation, but we have seen that Ansarullah group is the primary source of disinformation, and there are frameworks for disinformation, including the security, the religious, and also, and all this is preventing the documentation efforts, and this media disinformation leads to confusion amongst the society. You have to read the study because the journalists provided excellent information regarding the distortion of the societal awareness. And then the media disinformation reshapes the societal awareness and helps in the normalization of violence. And the study indicated that uh, journalists and human rights activists have been subjected to pressures and threats that limited their ability. The key impacts of disinformation, the exacerbation of the psychosocial harm to the victims and depriving children from justice and the truth, and the declining trust in local media, national media, and people are relying more on international media and their personal networks to access information. And national media does not have the appropriate institutional and organizational capacities to garner the confidence of the people. And there are some recommendations that I'll mention very quickly. Recommendations include developing legal frameworks to criminalize disinformation and the abuse of children, and to ensure safe access to information, and to create a national mechanism to monitor the child content. And also, there are some recommendations to the media and the civil society, including enhancing the professional verification before publication and training on digital verification and disinformation detection. There are recommendations to international organizations and donors, including supporting the verification platforms financially and technically. And in conclusion, media is sometimes an extension of the violation itself, and therefore, uh, it's no more about media, it's about human rights, and therefore it's a broader battle for child rights, and it includes the media, the laws, the civil society, and the purpose of that is to promote the child's rights to the truth and protection, and to achieve a pathway for transitional justice. Thank you, Safa, for this excellent presentation, and forgive us for the lack of time. Yusuf, طفي المايك. We should have spent more time discussing it. We in Russet the coalition, we are interested in the feedback and the comments that we will receive. So if you have any comments or questions, please raise them and share them with Rust Coalition so they can be incorporated in the project outcomes. Thank you, Safa, for your presentation. And I remind all the audience, please keep your microphones off so we can avoid any distortion. Uh, so, and now we move to the second part of this session with Mr. Farouk Al-Kamali, the editor-in-chief of YouTube platform for information verification. So he'll present to us a study on the disinformation in the context of the Yemeni conflict, its tools, its methods, and how it undermines accountability and the right of the public to know. So please proceed, Farouk. Hello, everyone, and I'd like to thank you, and I apologize for the lack of time. You have 10 minutes. Maybe I need less than 10 minutes. This information in the context of the Yemeni conflict, I was lucky. I have worked on some issues or topics of this study regarding disinformation. So I will discuss disinformation in the context of the Yemeni conflict, its tools, its motives, and how it undermines accountability and the right of the people to know. The conflict parties in Yemen uh, are using media effectively as a weapon to inflict the maximum damage and harm to the foes and the enemies. So it's not random. No, it is very systemic, and all the parties are using disinformation to shape the public opinion and to serve their agendas. And so they deal with the people as just followers, and they try to mislead them, and they try to conceal the crimes they commit against the people, including the war crimes or starvation crimes, as well as other abuses and violations. We have conducted a study and we found that these parties have used different means, including media, electronic publications, and social media. They have used that for their misleading activities, including the trolls, for example, and the fake pictures and the fabricated information and statistics. So there are different drivers behind this behavior. So this disinformation is not random. It is very systemic, and there are objectives include behind that, including the reshaping of the public opinion and to spread disinformation that targets other parties and to create a new reality in the minds of the people. And I can't hear the speaker. And campaigns are orchestrated to justify crimes sometimes and to conceal facts and to prevent victims from accessing justice. So we have seen different Disinformation campaigns in Yemen, in different parts of Yemen, different gun rates in different districts and by different political parties. And we see that the media discourse increases at the times of crises and turmoil. And Farouk, we can't hear you, Farouk. It's not clear. Maybe if you speak slowly. So it's about the spread of hate speech. These conflicting parties are spreading hate speech, and they are indoctrinating the young people. So, and this media, this campaign justified the assassinations and the killing of people, and it's like laying mines in the minds of the people. And I can't hear the speaker. I'm sorry. There is brainwashing that is being done and trying to spread fears and silence people and to make people afraid of change and to silence people. And also, is it better? Yeah, it's better. Please go ahead. It's okay now. You may proceed. So spreading panic, the military groups and the conflict parties are trying to spread fears. It's fear mongering. Not only that, but they are spreading hate as well. So Yemeni people are afraid of traveling, are afraid of the future, are afraid of the conflict, and are afraid of the stopping of the conflict. The Yemeni people are victims of fear, so they fear everything and they have panic. So the Yemeni people are living under a constant panic as a result of hate speech and disinformation and undermining the right to know. Through the studies, we have found that the right to know has been undermined. So they are laundering the crimes of the conflict, and this led to wasting the rights of people to relief, to redress, to reparations, and the denial of the crimes. So through this study, we found that there are different forms of media disinformation, and the outcomes of this disinformation are catastrophic on the daily lives of the people, for the average people, for the journalists, the business community, and the academia, and everyone. So this is what I wanted to present to you from the study and the research that we have conducted in the past. And thank you for your kind listening. Thank you, Farouk, for adhering to the time. And we apologize for the poor quality of the sound that we had. And I'd like to thank Farouk for the presentation on the issue of disinformation in the Yemeni conflict context and the tools used for that, as well as disinformation uh, on the audience and the misleading by conflict parties. Thank you, Farouk. And now we move to part three of this session with Mr. Khalil Kamil from the Media Freedoms Observatory, and he will present on uh, detecting disinformation and protecting children, and linking the misleading narratives to the six grave violations and the impact on the right of the victims to justice. Good afternoon, and thank you, Abdulillah. And I'd like to thank Trust Coalition for this kind invitation, and I'd like to thank the DT Institute. Before I discuss disinformation and its impact on the children and the right to the truth, we have to first understand magnitude of the violations we are dealing with as a society, and the perpetrators of these violations do not stop at perpetrating their crimes. At the same time, they use disinformation to hide their crimes and to distort facts. And these are grave violations against children, especially in the times of armed conflicts, as the situation in Yemen. And we have killing, recruitment, sexual violence, and deprivation of education and other violations that are criminalized by the Yemeni law and the international laws. The perpetrators of these violations, they understand the effective role of disinformation. And Farouk discussed the tools and the motives of disinformation. Please, Khalil and Basim, switch off your mics. Okay, go ahead. So I will talk about the importance of detecting disinformation and how to contribute through that in protecting the child rights to bring redress to the victims. These violations are not subject to the statute of limitations, and we have seen different human rights reports documenting myriad of violations against children, including studies from Russell and other studies from other civil society organizations highlighting what children are facing. And the United Nations have monitored more than 11,000 cases of violations against children, including killing and maiming of children. Children have been used and recruited to fight through the summer camps. Children have become the fuel of the war. We have seen different reports indicating that about 4 million Yemeni children are outside schools, dropped out, including 1.5 million children, girls. And this is because of the use of schools as military posts. These violations against schools and educational institutions in the past few years contributed to the increased rates of school dropouts and child labor, and children are deprived from continuing their education. And this represents a challenge facing children in terms of accessing safe and appropriate education. And the crimes of the conflict parties, especially the Houthi group, led to preventing people from accessing humanitarian aid. Despite the multiplicity of these crimes, so we, as civil society, we find that there are many violations that have not been monitored because of the concealment and because of difficulties associated with access. There are brutal violations against children, and not all of them are documented. And these crimes are happening, and there are people who try to conceal and hide them. So we are not talking about violations only, it's about dismantling the human rights system, and it's about misleading people, and this deprived the victims from redress and helped in ensuring impunity for the perpetrators. The past 10 years, we have seen hundreds and hundreds of violations committed against journalists and human rights activists and defenders, including the lawyer Abdulmajid Sabra, who was detained, and he was one of the few who remained combating the Houthis and trying to uncover their violations. And he was operating from within the areas controlled by the Houthis. Sabra, the human rights defender, is still in prison until today. It's enforced disappearance. He is in solitary confinement. He is denied visits, and multiple violations have been perpetrated against him. And his brother said a few days ago that he's under pressure to abandon his human rights work, and many of the media people have been detained because they spoke, and some conditions were imposed on them for their release, including to stop publishing about these violations, and this happened. And therefore, we see that the conflict parties, especially the Houthis, they managed to silence people. And these practices do cover the violations that are perpetrated, and it's about concealing truth. And sometimes media outlets and human rights activists try to avoid publishing anything to preserve their own safety. And uh, different organizations, including UN agencies, have been raided and their employees detained, and also prosecuting human rights defenders. It's a message, it's a threat to everyone who's trying to uncover these crimes. And the accusations are fabricated, these are mock trials. And people are accused or charged of espionage and destabilizing security. And the punishment can be death punishment. So there are very serious methods used by some of these parties to demonize the human rights activists. This is very, very serious. And this establishes systemic human rights violations, and this misleading made human rights activists suspicious and accused of being spies. These practices made it difficult for human rights organizations to operate. It's a crackdown against them. Therefore, human rights organizations cannot obtain licenses, cannot access the victims and the witnesses to obtain statements. Even the United Nations itself cannot have access to these victims to verify different information. And many families and relatives of conflict, of children in conflict areas, they afraid of speaking in order for their children not to be subjected to retaliation. So they prefer silence. And this does not mean that they don't want justice. It's because they are afraid of stigma, and they are afraid of losing the relics of hope that they have. So this is forced silence, and and the Houthis are issuing official statements saying that their areas are violations free, and so they are distorting facts, and even reporting through international mechanisms is not available for the victims, and the victims do not prefer to do that. I remember when I requested a family member to report a violation to an international mechanism, the family refused that because they were afraid of revenge or retaliation from conflict parties. And so I told them that this will not be an official document. This is something easy, but they were fearful and they tried not to provide any sort of information that can identify them, and this enable the conflict parties to continue their violations and to abuse children and to distort facts. And also, in some areas, security forces and the army are still controlling the buildings of schools, and therefore children are deprived from the right in education, and they continue to spread disinformation that they are occupying these schools for military purposes, although these schools are away from the front lines. So this media disinformation led to entire areas closed and sealed off. There's no information coming out from these areas. There's no documentation of the violations. There are no visits to the detainees, and there are no testimonies from children, and there are no guarantees for the safety of information providers. Even the United Nations itself sometimes cannot have access to the victims or cannot protect them. And this weakens international efforts to achieve justice. And this will also reduce the opportunities of holding the perpetrators accountable, and this ensures impunity. So children and their family members are the victims, and this creates trauma and wounds. And when these violations are denied, this leaves trauma with the victims. With the repeated, distorted narratives and stories and accounts, the society loses the understanding of the violations, and violence against children becomes a part of the normal reality, and then children feel that no one can bring justice and redress to them, and this makes them lose confidence in the state, society, in the civil society, and this undermines the idea of justice. And given this reality, and given this disinformation, we as civil society organizations, we should not stop documenting violations in the traditional manner. We have also to document what prevents the documentation of these violations. So we have to document the official denial by conflict parties. We have to document the distortion of information. We have to document this disinformation. We have to continue documenting the threats from conflict parties, and we have also to document the conflicting stories presented by the conflict parties. And all this will represent a very important legal material because it's a proof, it's an evidence about the intent of concealment and the impediment of justice. And this is a key element in international law. And we need to raise the awareness of the victims about the importance of documentation. And this is a critical point. We need to raise the awareness of the victims so they document everything that has happened to them in order to preserve their rights, because these violations are not subject to the statute of limitations. I invite all those who have been subjected to violations to document everything. And they need to write down all these small and big details, and they need to preserve the documents, the evidence, and they need to notify the relevant authorities in order to preserve their rights. And we need to know that uncovering disinformation is not about telling what happened. It is also about preventing what could happen in the future. It's about detecting any manipulation, and it forces the perpetrators not to repeat what they did. So it is a form of indirect protection, and it is an initial step to protect children. So I mean that there should be some serious actions to save children and to create the safe environment for them by exercising pressure on the conflict parties. And we need to hold accountable the perpetrators so it can serve as a deterrence. Khalil, you have 1 minute. Impunity will encourage the perpetrators to commit more brutal violations, and the international community has to work seriously through the real pressure. The international community can link international or humanitarian assistance to the respect of human rights, and there should be protection to society organizations working in the field of human rights, and the perpetrators need to be held accountable. We see some detainee exchange negotiations, and Abdul Qadir Al Murtada is participating. He's sanctioned, and he should be held accountable for his crimes. And the victims should be supported, and we have to provide psychosocial support and rehabilitation of victims, and we have to train the observers in the civil society regarding the verification tools and promoting legal protection. And at the end, truth is the first entrance to justice. And it's about rehabilitation, it's about preventing impunity, it's about providing a safe environment for the children. Thank you. Thank you, Khalil, and I'd like to thank you for this interesting presentation and for shedding the light on an important point, the initial documentation by the victims. The initial documentation has to happen by family members of the child victims uh, to to preserve these violations so they are not forgotten or lost over time. We understand the difficult situation and the political pressures exercised on everyone. Thank you, Khalil. Now we come to the part of the questions and answers Q&A, and please. So we'll start by taking the questions that you may have about what has been presented. So if you want to speak, please raise your hand. And we will ask you to speak, and then the panelists will have the opportunity to respond to these questions. So we have 29 minutes. We hope that we can adhere to the time limit. So we start taking the questions. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. So we start with Imad. Imad, you have the floor. You have 1 minute for your question or comment. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. I have two comments. The first comment, you talked about the government schools that are away from the front lines and that are still occupied by the army. So we have to name these governorates, the schools, and the military factions, at least the name of the school and the area. So we as a government, we can deal with that. The other point, Mr. Khalil, last speaker, in one of the points, he said that millions of children in Yemen are outside schools. I think this is an overestimation. This is an exaggeration. So, did you hear me? Thank you. Thank you. And we take the next speaker, Saddam. Okay, we take that down first and then we'll come to you. After questions. Number one, you said in the report that the initial documentation by the victims is important. If if the family members of the victims are not able to conduct any documentation or to report what has happened, so is it possible that there could be initial documentation by eyewitnesses, so the crime is not forgotten? Second question, how can we ensure quality and compliance in this study or adherence to the ethical standards and the integrity and protecting the privacy of people? And we have seen that some studies were conducted in some areas and they did not cover other areas. Okay, we move to Mona. Do you hear us, Mona? I'd like to thank you for all the efforts that you're making in this thorny issue. I have listened to your interventions and I find that you are talking about general things, millions of children, millions of victims, millions of media people, and hundreds of thousands. So you are misleading us. I, as a head of the rights of women and children in the Office of the Attorney General, and I am a member of the Committee on Preventing Child Recruitment. We hope from you and the international organizations that prepare these shadow reports to have transparency. So, in your interventions, you talk about conflict and the media disinformation. This is media disinformation. If there is any incident, please report it. Which area, which place, and who's responsible. So, is it in the Houthi controlled areas or the government controlled areas? If it is in the Houthi controlled areas, you have to say it frankly. Is it in the south? These violations, do they happen in the south? If you have names of specific government rights, please say that. The other thing, the solutions to media disinformation for children. So it's about awareness raising and how to have critical thinking and how to confront media disinformation. So schools have to be activated and we have to spread awareness about this. And as Sinan said, we in the government controlled areas, we don't have schools that are occupied by the army. And we don't have child recruitment in the government controlled areas. We have visited different camps, and the government does not recruit children. So, this is for a fact. So, and we had a list that was produced, and the United Nations was part of this process. And the United Nations official came and met with the team, and the national committee is there. So I hope that you can present facts, and you need to avoid generalization and because we are researchers and we have to be careful when we develop these studies and we prepare them. We need not to generalize, and those who prepare these studies are not in Yemen. So these studies should come from the field. Thank you. Thank you, Mona, for this intervention. And do we have any more interventions? Mutahar Budayji, please, you have the floor. Thank you very much. I will have a quick word before I refer it to Safa to clarify things. Yeah, please. I'll talk about our field work and the work that we have done based on the open sources regarding the documentation of disinformation cases. During the project period, our team monitored 18 disinformation cases, media disinformation for the six grave violations. And 90% of these cases are the responsibility of the Houthi group as the key actor of in child rights violations. So this is the basic point that we have to agree upon. So these 18 cases that we have documented, these were the bedrock of the study, and I advise all the colleagues to study the study carefully. We and our colleagues in the technical committee to prevent child recruitment, we will share with them the study and a copy of the cases that we have worked on. Number two, the confusion regarding violations. The child rights violations are documented through the field activities. We have people on the ground and they monitor and they document these violations. And these field visits result in interviews with the victims and a series of interviews. So we follow certain procedures for monitoring and documentation. And of course, in all our sessions with the victims, we encourage them to report these violations their children have been subjected to. It's either in the internationally recognized government or in the Houthi controlled areas. And we have received reports and we monitored these violations during the project period, and we have the database. As for the study itself, there was a comment from Saddam, and Ms. Safa will provide the answer. Thank you, Mutahar. We take another intervention from Dia. Lawyer Dia Saleh Al-Waini. Sorry, yes, please. I have very quickly seen the study and I have listened now to the interventions. Well, in my perspective, this is an excellent study. It is a critical study. It was focused and it relied on analysis and fieldwork. So thank you for that. And media disinformation is a big issue in Yemen. And it's not about child rights only, but it's the entire process of media disinformation is problematic. Media now is politicized. It's not free and fair, and it is spreading hate and feuds. In Hadramaut, we have seen some events that happened recently in Hadramaut, and it created a social schism. And media was the first tool to be used for that, for spreading hatred and driving a wedge between people. Judge Mona, refer comments are valid. So I'm not sure if the study have pinpointed or has pinpointed the perpetrators regarding who did this. Is it Ansarullah or the government? So generalizing things may not be right. So we have to be specific. We have to identify the responsible parties. Other than that, I'd like to thank you for the study, and I hope that you can conduct more studies regarding media and disinformation for children and for adults, because media is now abused and used by the politicians to create social wedge. Thank you, Via, for your questions. And now we go back to the speakers, to the panelists, so they can respond. So we start with Safa. I will respond to Mona. So I think she did not read the study. I recommend her to read the study first, and then she can provide comments because she will find the answers in the study. So she asked about why don't you name the perpetrators? Well, this is a study about media disinformation in media outlets. It's not about the violations themselves. So the study is about the media disinformation by media outlets re- reporting or affiliated with the conflict parties regarding the violations perpetrated against children. So we are talking about different types of violations, and we say that Ansarullah, pro-Ansarullah media outlets have done this and that, and they are the ones who are accused of the misleading more than others. And there was another question from another gentleman who talked about the ethical standards. Mona said that the ones who conduct the study are outside Yemen. This study is an analysis of materials documented by Rasad, and Rasad team is in Yemen. So, and the field part was done through journalists who lived inside and outside Yemen. And so the entire process happened inside Yemen. So the study was not conducted outside Yemen. And Saddam asked about standards. Maybe you can remind me of the question. I can't hear you. I asked you about the study, how the team ensured the adherence to ethical standards and integrity and privacy of the victims. Regarding the participants, the documentation of the cases was done by Rust Coalition, and I think they can answer that question. So they are the ones who documented these cases on the ground. The participants in the study are journalists, researchers, and human rights activists. And it was a questionnaire that we shared with them without names, anonymous, and without sharing personal details. So we had closed questions and open questions. And so they shared their experiences and their positions. And I think this guarantees that we respect the ethical standards. So I have received all the answers, no one else. And yes, it is anonymous. Thank you, Safa. Farouk, do you have anything to say? I can respond to Saddam and others regarding the cases. The cases that we have worked on are the cases about the media disinformation and the six grave violations children have been subjected to. So regarding these six grave violations, there has been media disinformation by the conflict parties. So we have monitored this disinformation process. It's not about monitoring the violations themselves. So we have monitored what is relevant to the media disinformation. So there was a crime, and then there is concealment of the crime, and there is disinformation. So this is what we monitored. And so we have monitored the media disinformation only on these six grave violations, the children have been subjected to, and the violations are countless. We can't say that the violations are 1 million or 1,000. We have just focused on the media disinformation, and we can monitor maybe 4 or 5 cases of media disinformation. So in 2 or 3 months, we have monitored these 18 cases of media disinformation regarding these 6 grave violations, and it was extraordinary effort because sometimes it's difficult to pinpoint or to find media disinformation. So we have 6 violations, and we try to monitor all the media coverage to see any disinformation, for example, shelling of schools and children maimed by mines, and Houthis saying that these mines were laid by the resistance, or the resistance saying that these mines were laid by the Houthis. The school that happened in Bani Matar in the school. Some said that these mines were brought in. Some said that there was training on mines. Some said that it's a camp. And some said that this is media disinformation. The Houthis said that what happened is remnant from the aggression. So they tried to avoid the crime. And we have questioned the facts, and we found that it was a mine that was brought into the classroom. It was not a remnant of the aggression, as they say. So we did not focus on the violations themselves, but the media disinformation associated with these violations. Yes, I agree with you, Farouk. There is confusion between the violation itself and the media disinformation. Thank you. Mr. Khalil, have your intervention. It's not the violations against children are no secret. For the numbers provided, violations are documented and are reported. I have shared with you in the chat box some statistics and some reports that you can see. The Houthi controlled areas, we know that there are some widespread violations in these areas. We can't hear the speaker. The prevention of humanitarian access, education violations, and for documentation, it's important. Even if you cannot report the violation, you have to document it at least. So you have to report it, you have to write down the details in order for things to be preserved, the dates, the people who caused the violation, the nicknames, the dates, the events. So everything that has happened has to be documented. I encourage everyone who have been subjected to a violation to report it, and they can report it without revealing their identity and their names, but they have to do that in order to preserve their rights. Thank you, Mr. Khalil. Firas, do you have an intervention, please? Go ahead. I'd like to thank you. I just wanted to explain very quickly. First of all, I'd like to thank all those who interacted with us, Judge Mona and Brigadier Ali. And this is the purpose of this session, is to have interaction between civil society organizations, victim relatives, the survivors, and the government representatives. So the study is published, but we will request all our partners in Yemen to publish their reports at least 48 hours before any webinar, so we can enrich the discussion. Regarding the percentages and what Judge Mena mentioned, we in SAFE program, we have monitored, and we can share with you the statistics. We have monitored 428 cases of grave violations against children in Yemen between 20 2020 and 2025, and 79% of these violations have been perpetrated by Ansarullah, the Houthis, and 21% was perpetrated by other parties to the conflict, including the government of Yemen, the STC, and others. This is according to the database that we have and the field reporters and observers that we have. The point that I also want to raise, the Brigadier Ali asked about the names of the schools that are controlled by the government forces and that are away from the front line. I think in the project we have 6 cases with the Rust coalition in Taiz in 2 districts. So I think the Rust team has already shared this with the government of Yemen, but we will follow up on this matter with our partner to reshare this information so we can have interaction from the technical committees, because you are doing your work and we will do ours, and otherwise there will be a gap. So this is what I wanted to raise. Thank you, Firas, for the information and the highlights. Time is upon us. Before we conclude, do we have any final remarks by Rust Coalition? Mutahar? Thank you very much, Abdulillah, for facilitating the discussion, and thank you for the panelists. And I'd like to thank those who made interventions, especially the activists and the representatives of the government and the technical committee on preventing child recruitment. So as Firas indicated, since 3 years ago, we have handed over an official letter to the Ministry of Human Rights. So, and we have submitted a list of schools that are still used by the army. 2 schools in Taiz, in some other schools in the front line in Asilu district and Al Aruq, and some schools require rehabilitation and maintenance. So this is not a criticism. This is in the spirit of partnership with the government. As we criticize the Houthis, we say that 80% of child violations are the responsibility of the Houthis. There are also violations. The internationally recognized government is responsible, and its affiliated parties, the STC, the Guards of the Republic, or the resistance groups in Taiz and Marib. So we are working in the field, and our reports are there. And we welcome any contacts from the government representatives or the activists, and we need to agree. We agree on the comments of the Brigadier Ali, the representative of the Ministry of Defense and the technical committee. We are keen to make the study available. So our colleagues in Aden and Taiz, they received the study PDF and they will distribute it to the participants. We do not have any reservations. The comments that come from you will help us. So thank you for your work. Thank you, Mutahar. And I'd like to thank those who prepared the papers in this session and the sponsors, the DT Institute, and I'd like to thank all the speakers and the panelists. And before we conclude, I'd like to say to all the participants that if you are interested in obtaining a copy of the study, please contact Rust Coalition to receive the study. And if you have any comments, you can contact Rust Coalition and send your comments, and they will be accommodated. So we have no more time, and thank you all for your participation and for your kind listening and for your interventions. I'd like to thank the panelists for the work they have done. In this difficult issue, media disinformation. We have explosion of information, social media. So thank you, Russell. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the DT Institute. I'd like to thank the researchers. I'd like to thank you, all the participants, and goodbye. See you next time.